This is a tutorial for functional range conditioning, PAILs and rails of the shoulder joint in overhead flexion. PAILs and rails stands for progressive and regressive angular isometric loading. And in the functional range system, we use PAILs and rails for three objectives. The first is to expand or increase range of motion. The second is to gain access or control over that range of motion. And the third is to improve the quality of connective tissue or the health of that connective tissue in the associated joint, muscle, or tendinous tissue itself. So what is overhead flexion? Overhead flexion is simply a linear movement of the arm and shoulder joint into this overhead straight up position here. Opposite is extension, which is a linear movement of the arm back this way. So before we get into our PAILs and rails training session, I will show you a few different setups you can use to access the stretch and get yourself into the overhead flexion position. So let's get into it. The first setup I'll show you to get into a stretch for overhead flexion of the shoulder joint involves using an elevated surface. Now in this case, I'm using a mobility block like this, but you could use a utility weightlifting bench. You could even use an ottoman or a countertop for this. So the position is going to be, in this case, kneeling on the floor. And I'm going to take my arm up to the top of the block, and I'll start to take my chest down to the floor in this direction to get into my end range of motion of overhead flexion. Another good setup for this involves using a dowel rod, where we're going to do the same thing. So I've got this dowel rod vertical out in front of me, and I'm going to grasp upon it with my arm in this position. And similarly, I'm going to take my chest down to the floor to get into my end range of motion, my stretch into overhead flexion. So those are two positions that you could use for setups. And then I will also show you two positions that we could use standing as well. So let's go on to those. The other setup that we can use to get into overhead flexion involves using a mobility strap. Now this strap here is number one, non-elastic. So this is not a stretching strap that you would use for mobility. This one does not stretch at all. Second, it has handholds looped and sewn into it at different lengths, which is really nice. And I got this on Amazon, pretty easy to find. So what I've done here is I've tied a knot into the opposite side of the strap, just like this, loop a knot through, and I've placed the knot on the other side of the door, and I've closed the door so that it's all the way shut. Now this opposite side of the strap could also be tied to a squat rack or an upright pole. Anything like that would work. So what I'm going to do is loop my hand into the strap like this. The stretch is much the same as the other setup, where I'm bringing my chest forward to get into that overhead flexion position and range of motion there. So that's another setup you can use. The last setup that I will show is very similar to the last one we just did. It uses the corner of a wall or a door frame. Now there's two options depending on how tall you are to do this one. Option number one for the shorter individuals is to take that arm and place it straight upon the door frame like this, or the corner of a wall. Same as all the other stretches, I'm going to incline my body this way to get into my overhead flexion position. And again, for the taller individuals, they could put their hand all the way up on the top of the door frame, and they might be able to get into a nice stretch in that position also. So those are the four different setups that I use with patients and clients, depending upon where they're going to feel the most stretch and the positions they feel most comfortable in. So let's get into our PAILs and rails session. For me, I'm going to be using the dowel rod. When we do our progressive angular isometric, we'll be taking the shoulder from overhead flexion and pulling down towards the ground, towards the block, or into the strap while you do your PAILs contraction. Your regressive angular isometric is going to be opposite. You're going to be pulling the arm up or pulling yourself deeper into the stretch. So in this case, I'm going to be driving the pole down through my PAILs, and I'm going to be trying to lift it up for my rails. Now, as I increase the stretch, I'm going to need to creep my hand further up or incline my chest down, and similar for you in your setup. So let's get into it. We always start our PAILs and rails session with at minimum a 60-second stretch. So I'm going to bring my chest down to that position, find my end range of motion in overhead flexion here. So we've got 60 seconds of stretching where I'm taking my deep breaths in, trying to increase the stretch a little more as I go through that deep breathing. Now you should feel stretch on the front side of the shoulder, potentially in through the lat muscle, along the back side, maybe a little bit in through the front of the rib cage here, potentially a little bit of bicep stretch, maybe a little bit of deltoid stretch there. So nice deep breaths in. Increase the stretch more if you can. Let's go about 20 to 30 more seconds. And again, when we're applying our PAILs contraction, we're trying to pull the arm down out of this position. And our rails contraction, we're going to be trying to lift the arm up, which in this case might pull you deeper into the stretch when you do that. Our PAILs will be squeezing everything on the front side of the arm, and our rails, we're going to be squeezing tissue on the back side of the shoulder. So when we do our PAILs, let's push at anywhere from 20 to 80% effort of contraction. So you get to pick. If you're just learning this, start at a low effort and work your way up. So I'm going to begin my PAILs by taking a deep breath in. I'm going to hold my core tight, and now I'm trying to drive that stick into the floor, or you're pulling forward on the strap, or you're chopping downward onto the block or the bench or the door frame. Hold for 5, 4, push, 3, 2, 1. Your rails, you're going to try to lift up further with the arm, squeezing at the back side of the shoulder. Hold, squeeze, pull yourself deeper into the stretch by contracting the back of the shoulder for 3, 2, 1. You may experience a little bit of cramping sensation at the back side of the shoulder doing that. That's okay. You got to push through that. Let's reapply our PAILs. Hold your core tight. Deep breath in, drive the arm down, out of flexion, pull the arm forward into the strap or the wall. Hold, 5, push, 3, keep pushing, 2, and 1. Rails, try to lift the arm up further, try to pull it behind your ear and your head. Squeeze like I'm trying to lift this pole up off the ground. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Relax. Now stretch deeper if you can. Try to take that chest further forward, lifting the arm further back and up. Deep breath in. Tighten your core. Drive the arm forward. Squeeze everything in the arm. Tight, tight, tight. Keep pushing. 5. Nice and firm. 4, 3, 2, 1. Rails. Try to lift the arm up and back. Try to pick that arm up off the block or back away from the strap or pull it away from the door frame. 3, 2, 1. Relax. Take it into your maximum stretch. Deep breath in. Back to our PAILs. Drive forward. This is our progressive angular isometric. Squeeze hard. Push hard. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Go into your rails. Pull the arm up. Try to lift it up away from the block or back away from the wall, or pulling, in this case, back towards the door frame or the wall where that strap is tied. 3, 2, 1. Drive as deep as you can into that stretch. Deep breath in. Let's push hard. Drive forward. Squeeze hard. Really push here. Fight for it. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Last rails. Lift the arm up. Squeeze everything in the back of the shoulder. Hold it tight. Keep lifting. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and relax. So after that session, you should find that you can get a little easier into that overhead flexion position, which can be a troublesome spot for a lot of people. So that is your tutorial and training session for functional range conditioning, PAILs and rails, progressive and regressive angular isometric loading of the shoulder joint in overhead flexion. Great job.